Disclaimer. I'm a law student. Any legal information provided is not legal advice. For that, please hire an attorney. Hi. Let's begin with a hypothetical. Let's say that you have a smaller leftist content creator. Let's say that this content creator has recently been involved in some very interesting projects. Let's say that one of these projects was a debate that they had recently with someone who has some pretty, shall we say, questionable views. And let's say that this project actually had gotten a decent amount of attention. And let's say that this project eventually got the attention of a substantially larger leftist content creator. And let's say that it even helped them a little bit, this other larger content creator, in a different project that they were working on. Let's say that this ended up being a wonderful video. And because this larger creator had incorporated a lot of smaller people, a lot of smaller content creators, and their arguments into his own, that he ended up creating a lot of recognition for a lot of smaller people, the smaller content creator included. And let's say the smaller content creator actually eventually was able to talk with this person and was particularly, shall we say, inspired? Was particularly inspired by this idea, by this new kind of unity, by this new kind of project that was sort of unseen on the left, but really got our attention. Question. Is this something which can be replicated more? And is this something which might even be a prospective solution to a lot of division on the left? So, hey everyone, how's it going? Thank you for joining us. It's great to have you here. And yeah, you know, it's anyway, it's great to have you here. I am glad to be back in Baltimore. I've been traveling for about a week or so. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to the discussion. So in case, you know, people didn't sort of gather from this hypothetical isn't a hypothetical. It's actually just a description of what happened. So recently, I was very fortunate to have been one of several smaller content creators who was featured in a video by Vadim / Creationist Cat. If you're not familiar with their work, they have a substantially large, I believe around 80,000 or so subscribers, and they make wonderful, wonderful content. I was featured a little bit in the video that they made on Ariel Scarcella and how she has been, shall we say, not exactly great with the trans community lately. And my debate with a recent defender of Ariel was actually something which he said influenced his work a little bit. And actually, as a very special treat, we're having Vadim on our stream tonight. So I don't really want to get into any of the more specifics of what we have planned. Without further ado, let's go ahead and join the call. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. Well, hey, welcome. We are live.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So I've already given like a tiny little explanation, or a little introduction, but you're probably better. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Vadim. I heard a little bit. I didn't hear your intro because there's a little bit of a timing issue. I was listening as it is broadcast sort of live.
Yeah,
there's always
I think there's
lag.
like a 30-second lag.
Yeah. But first of all, I want to say that was I've never been introduced with a hypothetical before. I think that's really awesome. I always love your hypotheticals. They're very interesting and entertaining. My name is Vadim Newquist. It's no big deal, but people commonly say, actually, 99% of people pronounce it Vadim. So
I'm so sorry. I should have asked before I went on. I apologize much.
No problem whatsoever. I forget my own name a lot of the time, so it's just not a big deal. I'm so used to people not getting it. But anyway, my name is Vadim Newquist. I also go by Hey It's Vadim within my videos, or just Vadim. And I have a channel called Creationist Cat, which has been around for, gosh, nearly 10 years. I mean, I'd say closer to 8. We are going to be rebranding at some point in the near future, and it's mostly going to be featuring myself because, well, maybe we can get into kind of like why I'm making that jump later. I started out, although, I mean, some people may know me, but the reason why it's called Creationist Cat is because the channel is hosted by a cat that's sort of like a cross between, I guess you could say, Homer Simpson. I mean, he's got kind of the stupidity of Homer Simpson, and he's a little bit like Stephen Colbert back in the Colbert Report days, in that, you know, he's very right wing, but it's all a joke, and he's kind of way more right wing and way more horrible in a whole number of ways than Stephen Colbert in terms of just how right wing he is. And it started out as a channel that was primarily talking about issues having to do with atheism, but both because of the fact that we had kind of tread over those issues for so long. And to be quite honest, maybe this is something we'll get into more extensively later, I started really feeling like the majority of the YouTube and actually the conventional atheist community was pretty cringe. I wanted to distance myself from that. And we kind of now, for the most part, 99% of our videos are either political or have to do with social issues. And we kind of put a comedic political lens to it, if you will. And yeah, I guess that's the best. I mean, it's really a channel that kind of, when I describe it, it doesn't really accurately, never seems to really do the trick. It's kind of something you have to see to really get. But yeah, it's pretty out there, pretty, I'd like to think, fun, and don't know what else to say about it. How are you doing, Riley?
I'm doing just fine. It's actually like, I definitely appreciate this because your video was my first exposure to your channel. So like I am talking, like you're talking to someone with like very little or like absolutely no background. So like I'll be asking a lot of questions and maybe some of them are rather simple and whatnot, but like, you know, I'm just using this as an opportunity to learn about you before we probably dive into like more relevant, up-to-date discussions, like some of the things that I know that you want to talk about, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Whatever you want to ask is totally cool with me. I mean, I'm sure there's at least a few members of your audience, probably more, that have no clue who I am. So that's all. It's all good.
All right, cool. So my first question. So you mentioned that you were previously more a part of the atheist community. So I'm a little bit aware of sort of the problems with the community just by virtue of being around other people and other creators who have sort of experienced some problems from there. So what brought you to start like to start creating content over there, right? You said that you came over here because like it was being a little cringe. Like how, like, can you talk a little bit more specifically about what was happening that caused you to sort of shift in your content?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, you know, the entire YouTube face of YouTube, aside from the atheist / skeptic, if you want to use that word, community, was just a kinder, gentler place back in around, I don't know, 2008. That's not when I started anywhere close to it, but I watched a lot of content creators who were doing stuff like that, kind of at the very jump of of YouTube itself.
Okay.
I came into the whole world of this little subculture by really, to tell you the truth, I had these friends. I hope this isn't kind of over explaining here, but I think it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I had these friends who I think were good people, but a little naive, and they saw these popular 9/11 conspiracy theory movies at the time, one called Loose Change, another one called Zeitgeist. And they were like, "Oh my God, Vadim, you got to check this out. This is so crazy." And I watched these and my bullshit detector went off like full throttle. And I was like, there's no, no way this stuff could be true. But yet at the same time, I didn't have the ability to properly debunk these things. So I got on YouTube and I found what is now a rather popular show called The Atheist Experience.
Mm.
And I had never really encountered many people discussing the topic of atheism very fully. And they had a special on 9/11 conspiracy theories, and I learned all these things that absolutely equipped me with the info that I wanted. But I was like, this is an intriguing show. And I started binge watching it. And I've never been a conventionally religious person in my life. I've
Sure.
always, like, when I had sort of beliefs of that sort, they were more kind of fit into, for lack of a better way of putting it, kind of new agey things, like past lives and crystals having the ability to heal and stuff that I think is kind of ridiculous now. And I watched maybe 2 days worth of the show and I thought to myself, I came here to debunk 9/11 conspiracy theories and now I'm an atheist. Like they've presented so much information that I cannot kind of reason these things. And that kind of led me into the atheist world. And for a while, I think it was a very progressive community. It had a lot of people who I would say were very strong when it came to feminist issues. And I decided to start doing Creationist Cat because I have a comedy background. And I wanted to start a comedic channel that, and I've always been kind of influenced by political comedy and comedy that just has more of a point to it than just kind of trite things that'll make you chuckle.
Sure.
So I decided to create that channel. And then for about a year or two, I would say it was pretty cool. And then I slowly started seeing the scene morph and it kind of became a nightmare because, you know what, I can get more extensively into that. I'd like you maybe, I don't want to kind of just monologize here. I'd like to give you a chance to kind of, say things in response.
Yeah.
But that's sort of what happened. And it was a process, and I can get more into that because I think that hearing more about that is interesting and kind of informs where I'm at now as a creator.
Okay, and that makes sense. No, and I mean, like, you're fine. I really appreciate like hearing all this background. Like, I'm someone where it's like more context is better than less, right?
Cool.
So I have to ask then. So when everything was sort of going bad in that community, it sounds like a lot of people, like, would it be a fair representation to say that a lot of people started getting like a lot more further right or reactionary? Like, would that be? Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it really started, there was just a kind of a trend. I mean, it was already being discussed in other circles, but certain content creators who were popular started discussing feminism quite a bit. And at first, I would say that they were going, and this is at the very, very beginning. A lot of people probably won't even recall this, but I think that they were going after decent targets. They were going after people who are incredibly sex negative, who wanted to ban porn, who had a problem with sex work in general.
Okay.
And these are people who are no longer on YouTube, and I would be incredibly surprised if they are not TERFs right now, because there's such an intersection with SWERFs and TERFs.
Yeah.
Like I actually mentioned at the very end of the video that you're in. And so at first I was like, okay, I don't mind that too much. And then it really started becoming a trend, and I started noticing that a lot of people I thought were, well, in some cases, they were focusing on quote unquote SJWs, or that was the popular term at the time, or regressives was another term that they used. And like, there was a hot second where I thought, maybe maybe because I have been living in I used to live in New York City,
Sure.
kind of in the heart of things. And now I've been for many years in kind of like this bumblefuck town in Florida. And I started thinking for a very short period of time, maybe the kind of social way that lefties are interacting with the world, maybe it's changed a little bit. Maybe they are a little more kind of, like just doing harm to the cause and whatnot. And so for a very small second, I never was anti-feminist, but I, for a small second, thought like, oh, okay, there's a utility to these videos. Okay. This is good because it's challenging the left to be better. But then really, it only took a month for me to realize, no, fuck that. This is really being used to overall denigrate feminism and kind of put feminism all into one box, make it appear as though not just feminists, but the left were, and I don't like this term. If you saw me, I'd see that I'm doing air quotes here, like, screechy SJW types.
Gotcha.
Again, that's their terminology, not mine. And I fucking hated it. But it was this really weird time where things really were swinging pretty hard to the right. And I knew that, like, I basically, if you look at some of my videos, you can see sort of jabs at this sort of stuff. And as time goes on, I got more and more vocal about it. But there was a time where because of the fact that I was making money off of this, and I wasn't making so much that I was like, that I could do significant harm to my channel, I did not speak out about this stuff as much as I wanted to. Sure. But then it did get to a point where it was just like, what the fuck is going on here? People are befriending people who are obviously like fucking racists. There was, I mean, I maybe this is circling back a little bit, but like, for instance, there was a time when things were good in this community where there was a small bunch of people who believed in race realism, who were not atheists, but were making videos on race realism. And the community that existed at the time came together and they were fucking great. They just made all these videos debunking this shit. And then about 3 or 4 years later, probably closer to 3, maybe even 2, it popped back up. And now it was like the dominant, like, more people believed in that shit than, yeah. I mean, you have to realize that this is pre-left tube, there really was not a left tube. And I think that Contra was one of the, like, I mean, there are other people who really kind of helped reshape the face of YouTube. But I remember seeing her videos, and this is the last thing I'll say. One of the wrongest things that I've ever, or one of the things that I've ever been the most wrong about in my life is when I first saw her videos, I thought, wow, these are fucking amazing. She's got so much talent. There's so much creativity here, making amazing points. This will never catch on. Like, that was my first thought. Yeah, because you have to understand that, like, how the like really the only people who even came close to conveying some of the things that she conveyed in her videos, they were people who were doing more kind of pop angles on feminism, like Lacey Green, and I don't know the names of all these people because they are not necessarily people that I followed very closely. And I, in my opinion, they weren't anywhere near as interesting or as cinematic or creative, or just really got to the heart of a lot of issues. I mean, she's a very rare creator, of course.
Sure.
But Yeah, and that was sort of that point when I discovered her. This is I'm going to just finish up this up and whatnot. But right around the time that she popped up, it was at the time that I had started kind of speaking out, started making videos where I was like kind of saying within them, like, hey, like, are we okay with this shit going on here? Like, look at how people were starting to really embrace people like Paul Joseph Watson, Steven Crowder, and they were still calling themselves quote unquote skeptics. Now I think that's a totally garbage term because it's been flushed down the toilet by people who ruined the brand.
Sure.
But there was a time when skepticism really meant something to me. And when I say skepticism, I'm not talking about these online idiots. I'm talking about people like Carl Sagan. I'm talking about the amazing Randy. I'm talking about a lot of founders of the movement who had a much better approach to put it a much better approach than these idiots who basically just say whatever they want and slap on the term skeptic to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So now I have to ask them because I think it's pretty fair to say, based on what you said, that you were in this position where you saw what was happening and you were able to reasonably recognize, oh wow, this is all terrible. Someone needs to do something, or you need to step away from it or take some action. I'm curious in wondering why. And again, I'm not sure if this is something we can conclusively, determine. But in your opinion, why didn't more people sort of follow then? Why didn't more people call out what was happening and the way that the skeptic community was going in at this point? This all sounds like race realism, all this sounds terrible. Just more blatantly
there were some people who did, and they would get a lot of pushback. There were two different factions of people that I would say push back against it. There were those who were already labeled SJWs. I certainly called it out, but there was I would say a smaller minority with there were probably a lot of people who were in the community who thought it was total bullshit, but didn't want to speak out against it for fear of kind of losing subscribers and whatnot. And at the very beginning, I remember when this whole thing came up, there was this user called Rage After the Storm or something like that. In fact, I think I saw the name flash on your chat.
Yeah, it popped up my chat. I was wondering what that was. I saw it and I was like, that makes no sense to me. Yeah. All right. Relevant somehow.
She was, it's interesting because the people who would talk about, and this is one of the problems with the alt-right, they've learned how to brand themselves well in the last several years. The people who were talking about it the first time, these were all, I don't want to kind of sound too insulting, but these are all kind of gooberish looking people. Whereas this girl, Rage After Storm, she's horrible, but she's very cute, has the sort of looks like Daria from the MTV show, had those sort of nerdy glasses, pretty girl. Sure. And she made this video that was one of the first videos that really broke the ice with a topic in in a big way. She got hundreds of thousands of views, and there were a lot of people at first who were like, whoa, this is really fucked up. No, this what? And there was even a hangout with several shitlord YouTubers where they were debunking it, and I think only one of them among them really had any knowledge of the subject. It's still good that the others kind of felt compelled to do that. But then, a few months after that, literally one of those people, at least one of those people in the chat, I can't remember everyone that was included, was championing race realism. One of those people was Andy Worski, and I don't know if you've heard of that gentleman.
I'm familiar, yeah.
Yeah, total kind of sleazebag. And eventually, created a channel that revolved around alt-right issues and was a basically a place where people like Richard Spencer and others could go and be just not get any pushback, or practically no pushback. And yeah, I actually had an experience around 2017 where I knew that this was going to happen at any moment, because I just on Twitter, I was calling out people like Sargon and Akkad and other users that I just thought were kind of spreading a lot of bullshit. And I also, I made like a video where I totally mocked Milo and kind of that is Milo Yiannopoulos.
Right.
This was right before, or like actually as I was making it, that's when like the big scandal occurred with him. And
I can't remember. Can you remind me?
Well, there was this what really kind of dethroned him, or made him kind of an outcast within the right, is he had been on both the Joe Rogan podcast and this podcast called oh my god, I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of it, The Drunken Peasants. And in both of them, he made these comments about, like, they were jokes about how he like used to have sex with his priest. And on the Joe Rogan show, he said something about how when he was 13, he had, it's very unpleasant, unfunny jokes, but he said that he like he was saying this as if it was true. I do not believe it because it sounds pretty weird, but he said that he lost his virginity in a gangbang with a transsexual and which is weird because he's been very transphobic,
right?
And three black men. Or maybe it was 4 or 5 black men. I forget what it was, but he made, it was really the priest comments because, no, actually that as well, I guess all of them, because he was underage at the time, and here he was joking about it. And
yeah, it's not a good look.
Yeah, that was sort of at the height of his popularity that happened too, is right when his book came out. And it was like a week after he appeared on the Bill Maher show, on Politically Incorrect. And then so the reason why I bring that up is that was around the time that I had and there's actually a really, do you know who Sean and Jen is, right? Or maybe you don't.
No, I do not.
Oh, actually, these days he goes just by Sean. He used to go by Sean and Jen.
Yeah. All right, I know Sean.
Yeah. And so he made a video debunking all of this, and he doesn't really bring me up into it. And it's probably because, one, I had made a video debunking it, which is now off of my channel for some reasons that I won't go into. Okay. Even though that I liked it at the time, this is a little complicated to explain, so I won't get into that.
Sure.
But basically, this user who, he's an interesting guy. I'm actually friends with him now, and he realizes what garbage this video was, and he has, to my knowledge, reached out to all the people that he kind of was like, to some degree, lied about within the video, and he apologized to them. But I was kind of the person that the video revolved around. It was this hour-long video about how horrible SJWs are. And I was then, at that point, I was kind of outed as an SJW. And yes, I do have lefty politics. One thing that I didn't say in the beginning that I think is relevant to bring up, before I go back to that, is that I actually, when I started my channel, and I guess I started going into this but didn't finish. I started my channel because I thought, you know what, this is a good way to kind of maybe bring some people slightly over to lefty politics. Not that atheism has become very right wing, but at the time I thought maybe I'll challenge some people who are kind of, religious and have like a right wing sensibility because of the fact that they believe all of this bullshit. And so I felt like it was good to circle back and just let that be known. But when that video came out, a lot of people had already been kind of like in my comments, been saying like, so some people would be like, what, this is bullshit, you're getting all SJW, blah, blah, blah. But it wasn't called out in a big way. And from that point, I immediately lost about 10,000 subscribers.
Oh,
which was
wow.
huge for me at the time because I just had like a little over 60,000.
Mm-hmm.
And it completely stunted the growth of my channel. And then I also lost a lot of money, both through Patreonship and just the views went down on my videos.
Mm-hmm.
And in the long run, I'm glad it happened because there were a lot of assholes that just purely because of the fact that I was inside this this group of content creators
Mm-hmm.
and things changed around me, I was associated with all these people.
Right.
And the last thing I'll say about this is that I can't tell you how often I get comments on my videos saying things to the effect of, wow, I haven't checked out this channel in years. I just figured you became an asshole like everyone else in this community. And thanks for not being an asshole. You seem pretty cool. It's either that or I've purposely avoided this channel because I've always just I knew your connotation with that with that whole like pocket of content creators
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it turns out you're not an asshole. Thank you for not being an asshole. So I'm always pleased when I see those things, but I wish I didn't have that connection in the first place.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Well, I mean, like, people come from all sorts of,
Yeah.
backgrounds. Like, it's not like we can ultimately control, where we've been in life. Like, everyone has different paths for how they grow and develop. And, whether, like, for me, I really don't care what people's backgrounds are for being on the left. People come from all sorts of different places, but, like, ultimately it matters that you ended up here, right? That's what's most important to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's also interesting that we talk about sort of like the relationship between like a creator and their audience, right? I was just recently, so I just drove back from Ohio. I drove like 6 hours today. And so I had a chance to listen to a lot of stuff that I've been missing over the week as I've been spending time with family. And one of them was the debate that Vosh had with Count Dankula, specifically about how Count Dankula has like such a massive following of people who are like racist or far right or whatever. And a lot of the discussion was about like whether or not Count Dankula had any responsibility for that. The fact that he had curated an audience of like predominantly people who are racist or far right or whatever, right? And it's just always interesting to me hearing some people, and I mean like this is I assume the position that like people do have some responsibility for the audiences that they curate, right? Because like when you put yourself in such a position where you are actively cultivating a culture, even if you don't explicitly say something that's racist or say something that's sexist, even if you are sort of like signaling things that they may like, and you end up having like a lot of people who are racist in your comment sections, right? Like that's sort of that's not a great look, right? And it could end up creating like a larger culture for these people, and I'm not about it. So it makes me really happy to hear that like even if you haven't necessarily addressed it specifically, like even if it left kind of like because of reasons outside of your control, like I'd like to think that your audience has probably been better for it, with a lot of these people sort of purged from your comment section in your videos.
Oh, absolutely. And I want to say, just because I believe, in full disclosure,
Sure.
and I have said these things publicly before, but when I'm discussing these things, I always like to just be completely truthful. There were, I would say probably 4 to 5, maybe less videos that I made during that brief period of time where I thought that I did not realize just how toxic all of this discussion of these topics were. And you know what, and they were pretty tame videos. Like I think I was actually going after things that are fair game. However, that being said, once I kind of made the realization that I had, that this was going on, that the real object, but for most content creators, or I don't know, I think that what ended up happening is that any content that was made that mocked, quote, SJWs or feminism was used to create this narrative to make the left look bad in general. And they, of course, very much overemphasized or exaggerated. I mean, 90% of the time they're not really being truthful about the people who they're talking about, about their actual thoughts or whatever. And the other stuff is just like, I don't know, finding someone on the street who was shot with like a phone cam, just having like a meltdown or something,
Sure.
and being like, look, this is what left wingers are like. And so I don't want to I feel like I need to just own up to the fact that I made some content like that, and that content is no longer on my channel. I took it down pretty quickly once I realized what was going on. I was just like, I don't want to add to this fodder, to this like kind of, because again, even though that my videos weren't nearly as bad as a lot of people's, I feel like everything is a drop in the bucket, you know? And I just did not want to add to that. And so I don't want to act like I was completely innocent in it all. I made some things that I wish I hadn't, but yeah, just be in the interest of being completely open and honest here. I'm just letting you know that.
Yeah, and listen, I completely appreciate that. Again, like I said earlier, and I'll touch on that a little bit, but I'll explain a little bit more, right? Again, I really do not care about the background where someone came from. All I really care about is where someone's at today. And especially like, you know, I'm not going to make it out that like the left has to be this place where we have solely people who are, you know, who are and have always been just like these morally pure beacons for everyone. Because I mean, for me,
Sure.
Right, like I'm a consequentialist. I want to be able to have people who are leading the movement who are knowledgeable, but who also are able to relate to the average person. Let's face it, most people who sort of are involved in leftist politics come from either centrist or far right backgrounds, right? For the vast majority of people. You could probably make a strong argument. I mean, like, I know that Contra has talked about this a lot, and I know that this is a contested point in the community, but I see it as an admirable quality that she has been able to do so much work to be able to de-radicalize people who had been sort of brought over to the far right, especially with sort of this rise of far right nationalism and populism over the past couple of years. So
yeah,
when you're talking about these videos that you've made before, I mean, like, to me, like from where I'm sitting, that's you back then, and this is you now, right? I see two different people. So I appreciate I completely appreciate your honesty. Also, the fact that you took down the videos is like just that extra step, right? I'm not even sure if I'll necessarily require it, but that's just like the extra thing that shows me that, like, yeah, like I appreciate you being honest with me for the sake of transparency. I do not hold that against you in the slightest.
Sure. There's one video that's still up, but it's because it was posted on another channel, and I don't really have any say in that. But I won't mention who it is, but there actually is it's not Contra. There is a very popular lefty content creator who's much more popular than I am, who I once spoke with, and I happen to know that they had and it wasn't even that bad. It's not like they were, I don't know, saying anything too reactionary or anything, but they once had, before they became wildly popular and rebranded themselves, a rather small atheist channel as well. And they, even though that they weren't that bad, they were a lot more shitlordy than they happen to be now. And I did speak with them about it one time, and they were like, yeah, could you not mention that I did that? So I'm not going to say their name, but there's others out there, and they're great. You know, I certainly don't hold that against them either. But I believe people can change and have redemption arcs. I don't think that I got that bad, but I always, I love Vaush. He has certain people on his channel who I have a lot of history with, and some people who I actually like. I don't want to name these people just because I don't want it to seem like I'm kind of like dumping on them or anything.
Sure.
Some of them I actually appreciate the journey that they've had, and do think that they have kind of changed a decent amount. But and I do not think that Vaush is to blame here, because it's like I can't expect him to be like an internet historian and know every single thing that these people did over the course of their career. Even though that I'm very willing to kind of accept them and whatnot, when I hear them, I know certain things that they're not kind of owning up to. I'd like to personally hear them say, like, I did X, 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 and Y. And, for me, maybe it's just because I went through that period where I was kind of an outcast suddenly among those people, and kind of treated at like, the modern equivalent of woke scolds. I put that word in quotes. And that's how they were towards the quote SJW community. And yeah, I just like to see a little bit more of that, but that's neither here nor there. That's, we don't have to talk about that too much. But yeah. I just wanted to throw that out there.
No, and I mean, like, I get that. It is, I think that the main concern that a lot of people have, right? Because again, like, I'll say it again, just to be clear, like, I do not mind people coming from whatever background that you do. I only care about where you're at in life, and if where you're at's here, then hey, welcome. The tent can always be bigger. I think that the fear that a lot of people have, though, and this is usually like the main criticism that people have against like appealing to people who come from, these sorts of backgrounds, is that they haven't exactly, shall we say, cleanse themselves of all of these beliefs, and that they might still color some of their arguments. So I mean, like, I do understand the idea of just like, wanting to get like a statement from the creator, like, hey, can you just like let me know that you don't believe these things? Like, I understand that you like I understand that like the content that you're doing right now might suggest that very heavily, but like it would just make me feel a little bit safer if you just said that. Like, I think that that's a reasonable ask, right? And I think that there's a good amount of people who do that. And like, is it absolutely necessary? I'm not sure if it is, because I mean, like, these creators are going to continue to do the work, they're going to continue to exist in the space, but I mean, like, will it make them a lot more, will it make their their audience and the people around them, other content creators in that space, a lot more comfortable? I think so, right? Like, I'm inclined to agree with that.
I mean, Jack Saint, are you familiar with Jack at all? Jack is a really excellent content creator. We actually collaborated somewhat recently on a video on Tim Pool, and he had a great just a couple days ago. If you go on my Twitter later, you can find it, because I retweeted it, but it basically said something to the effect of, hey, if I'm all for people changing, I'm paraphrasing very poorly here, but if you are kind of trying to turn over a new leaf, and yet you leave up so much of this content that is damaging, then I'm just not going to believe you. And I think he was talking about a very particular creator who Vaush had on somewhat recently. Again, I don't want to name names. I guess I'll just say, because of the fact that Shu is like the person that people might think of immediately. It's not Shu. But they still have up a lot of stuff that is very questionable, and his whole thread was spot on in my opinion. I'll also say for these these people, I think it's very difficult for people, especially young people, but people in general, when they reach a great deal of success, to kind of change in the public eye. There's so many incentives for them to stay the same. And so I do have a little bit of understanding in that way. And then there are some people, one person who I am willing to call out, because I think that they've done, even though that I'd like to see them go further in their change. One person who I think it has been really good in this regard actually is Hunter Avalon. And
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah. Go on.
Yeah. And I never thought that, like, when I first saw that guy's content, I never thought I'd say that about him, because he had some really terrible stuff. But when he is talking with Vaush, he is very, like, forthcoming about, like, yeah, some of my stuff just is really embarrassing to me. And even stuff that I did as much as like 2 months ago, I regret doing. And he has no hesitation to call out the shit that he did. And I admire that. That is difficult.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, so
That is,
I
no, no,
guess,
no, but I completely agree, and it is
yeah.
interesting. I always think about, because I mean, mind you, it's not like like I'm familiar with a lot of the. I probably know a little bit about like some of the the different creators that you've been talking about. I know a little bit about Shu, but like I was following when Hunter Avalon quote unquote left the right, or however you want to put it, right? And it
Mhm.
is very impressive, because it is like so rare nowadays to see people actually take like that deep, that degree of introspection, and look themselves hard in the mirror and realize, oh shit, like I actually, like I fucked up, or I was wrong, or something like that, right? Like it's unfortunately a lot more common. And I think of some creators, like people I've debated, or like like Mars, or like people he associates with, or all that, right? And we get like, there are other examples. Those are just ones that now I have some degree of a relationship with, right? Where it's, you have people who you disagree with very strongly on certain things, and you present them with empirical evidence to the contrary, and they just dig their heels in the sand. They say, well, I don't care, right? It's very
Mhm.
hard to, and there could be any of a number of different incentives. Maybe it's because of money, maybe it's because they have a platform that they have to keep, that they have to be consistent for. Maybe it's just that they don't want to admit that they're wrong. I mean, it
Mhm.
could be a number of things, right? So it's not like I don't have sympathy
Yeah.
for these people, to the extent that, like, okay, I can understand why you have these opinions that you do, and you're not, changing your mind, or like remedying your mind, or remedying your opinions in the face of, contravening, contrary, like superior evidence. But my sympathies also begin and end at the point where their platform and their opinions infringe on the ability for other people to live free and fulfilling lives, right? Like when you have a
Yeah.
platform which you don't want to change, but you're also fundamentally operating from a position of platforming race realism, or transphobia, or like anti-sex work, like whatever you want to make it, right? um
Mhm.
I might feel bad for you a little bit, because I know that you're a little tied to your audience, or there are these other factors to consider. But on the same but on the same point, you're also platforming some pretty terrible stuff, and I feel like you probably should have known that when you were getting into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
um
Um, yeah, go.
no, 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 you're all good, you're all good. If there's I didn't know if you had like another thought that you wanted to add on there. If not, I actually kind of wanted to move the discussion to a related, but a little bit of a different subject.
Yeah, sure.
All right, cool.